But first, would the clerk, Ms. Bask, please take the roll?
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw. District 3, Karen Brill. District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
All right, we have a quorum. All 7 board members are present. Also at the dais are the General Counsel, Mrs. Rico, and of course Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, and the board clerk took the roll, and we have a new guest up here that's a trainee, my wonderful executive assistant from the board office, Maria Baez. So you're going to have to put up with us a little bit today, and we'll try to behave. Sometimes it's tough for us up here, but we'll do our best. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Our first workshop for the day is our semi-annual instructional review. Before I turn it over to our Deputy Superintendent, Keith Oswald, I wanted just to state for the public to know that over the last couple of months, there's been a lot of conversation, as long as I've been the superintendent, around what we as a school district are doing in reference to infusion. And so I just wanted to state, because it's not, it will be discussed briefly within this review, but it's important for the community to know that we have started meeting with different community groups. I want to thank all the board members who have brought people to my attention, and we've started creating that process with the goal over the next year to really look at our work in this area and begin to really improve our processes and then market what we're doing across the district and get better every single day. And so I just wanted to state that because there's been a lot of conversation in the media about it. Our team is doing a great job, but obviously there's room for improvement. And so I'm looking forward to meeting with all the different groups. And I just wanted to thank the board for when constituents call you to ask for meetings that we're setting those up. So thank you. At this time, I turn it over to the Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy, and good afternoon, board members. We're excited for our annual instruction review that really takes a deep dive in looking at our results from this previous school year. Presenting with me today, we have our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Sheffield, our Chief Performance Accountability, Mark Howard, and our Assistant Superintendent Professional Growth, Carlene Millen. Always guiding our work is our vision and mission statement, really to provide that world-class education for all of our students, in particular with a special lens around equity. And we're going to take a look at our strategic plan a little bit deeper. At this time of the year, we do want to look at our long-term outcomes and how are we doing marked against our long-term outcomes for each of those areas. We do have those 4, as well as some of our instructional practices, our work. We'll take a little look at that as well. Last week, we had our kickoff with our school-based administrators and our directors and above, really, and our theme this year, Ready, Set, Goal. It was a great event, really getting our schools focused for this upcoming year, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the work that happened there. And wait for it, yes, Palm Beach County School District, we are an A-rated school district. So let's give a round of applause. Thanks. Yeah, and thanks to the great work of our schools, our teachers, our students, this is what happens. So to dig a little deeper into this A, our first long-term outcome is 3rd grade reading. When this came out, did alert the board that we did take a dip here to 54%. We've already begun, and throughout this summer, been working with our regionals, our instructionals, around really focusing in on our area, especially in K1 and 2, and then those individuals working with our school principals and administrators last week. Our second long-term outcome, high school readiness, is the composite between academics, so ELA performance, math performance at 8th grade, level 3 and higher, as well as attendance, no more than 11 or more days absence, and just no out-of-school suspensions. So we did take a dip there in a couple different areas at 59%. Again, our middle school principals are focused. They each have their results to work on this particular long-term outcome. We talked before about our graduation rates. Again, 91.7%. This is one area that we've already exceeded our long-term outcome at 92%. And when you look at our subgroups in many of the areas, almost eliminating the gap. When it comes to our fostering postgraduate success, long-term outcome 4, we did see a 1% increase. This is when we're looking at industry certifications, our students that are taking college-ready courses in high school, AP, ACE, IB, et cetera. Again, seeing a nice increase there, and we'll dig into that a little bit more deeper. These are particular areas where Palm Beach County ranked top amongst the other urban school districts in these particular areas. We're going to dig a little bit deeper. When it comes to our A-rated schools, Palm Beach County is ahead at elementary, middle, and high schools, more A-rated schools. The only area combination where Dade County is ahead there. So when we look at the actual improvements and how our district is graded over the course of the last 4 years, 15 being more of a baseline year, gains was not counted at that point, we can see across those different areas that we've seen significant growth, particularly middle school acceleration, an 18% gain. The total points earned starting last year where we earned that A back. Again, we're seeing another 5 points added into that total points, into that A. You're seeing significant gains in the graduation rates, et cetera. And then some areas that we need to dig in deeper. When we look at science achievement, we know in grade 5, we need to take a deeper look and really focus in on that. When we compare to the other large urban districts across the board, we like to brag that we're a top-performing urban school district. We continue to be that with our A rating. However, we do see that Dade County has done some really good work, makes some considerable gains as well over time. Palm Beach County continues, again, to be tied or second place in many of the areas that we are graded upon. Currently, we're up to 66% of our schools rated A or B. And you can see over time, since FY16, we've increased from 94 to 109 A-rated school, A and B-rated schools. And Ms. Andrews talked about this last week. This is just, take a moment to take this in. Since the inception of school grades, so the first time in history that we have no D or F schools in the Glades region, we just want to be a big shout out for our Glades community and their work. And also Canal Point and Pioneer Park taking their school grade up to a B, and Gladeview jumping up to a C. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And there it is, Gladeview going F to a C, and also Jupiter Elementary School going from a C to an A. 2 schools going up too. And then these are all of our schools that had 1 or more letter grades improvement. We have 24 schools across the board. So just great job by our schools listed here. And, often there's a big point spread within the grading of a letter grade, especially like in C. So you can see like Hidden Oaks didn't move their letter grade up. However, they went up 71 points within that. So this is just some outstanding achievement that's going on in these schools here that not necessarily moved the grade, but within that still went up many, many points. Also, when we talked about our alternative schools, we had 2 schools last year, unsatisfactory. South Area Intensive actually went from unsatisfactory to commendable. So a big shout out for South Area Intensive. And also the Royal Palm School going off from unsatisfactory to maintaining. So all of our alternative schools are in good standing at this time as well. So great news. When it comes to school improvement, what you formerly known that we've been calling differentiated accountability, the state did change the language here, and we had 4 schools last year in differentiated accountability. All 4 schools came off the list. So again, outstanding work. Now with that, we had 3 schools move into now what we'll call school improvement. So Indian Pines, Washington Elementary, and John F. Kennedy JFK are single D schools, so they're at Tier 1. So at Tier 1, there's targeted support and intervention. So here we'll be working on an instructional review, their school improvement plan, and making sure that we address the areas where they need to improve. We have no schools at this time that are in risk of any type of turnaround status. So it's a great position for our district to be in. Yes, that's right. And our low 300 here, we have our list of low 300 schools. A couple areas I just wanted to note that 2 schools that did come off a low 300 in the Glades, we will be keeping those schools with extended school day as we did in the past because of the location, the geographical location around and with transportation. Also, when it came to Washington Elementary, we will continue to provide them extended school day, especially because they're going to be housed with Lincoln. So those will continue to provide those resources. And Grove Park and Northmore do come out, and as we did in the past, they received some dollars as to support as they come off of the low 300 support system.
At this time, I want to speak to you briefly about Florida's version of the Every Student Succeeds Act. This is federal accountability, and essentially the way that we've framed this with our school principals is, are you an A-rated school for all students? The ESSA developed this federal percent of points index, which takes into account each of the school grade components, plus the progress of our ELL students on another assessment called Access for Ls. So it's basically looking at growth or progress on the Access for Ls, plus all the school grade components for each of the subgroups with a particular focus on FRL, minority students, and students with disabilities. So this is simply pointing out, simplifying the formula. Each of those components is worth 100 points, develops the index, it's reported out for each subgroup. On the next slide, this is our expression. The state doesn't actually report the data this way. They give the data to us for each of our schools. But what we've done and what we did last year before the state released it is we've graded ourselves. We've graded the district. The state doesn't provide an A, B, C, D letter grade for districts in terms of these subgroups, but this is our expression of that. And as you can see, overall for our elementary schools, we're an A-rated system. When it comes to a couple of the subgroups, our Black students and our students with disabilities, then we're rated at C with a particular weakness in science for those students. The takeaway from this is at middle school, you'll see a similar pattern, including our ELL students, where we're rated either C, and our students with disabilities are rated D. Again, science coming up as a particular weakness, and then at the high school level, we have 3 different subgroups there rated at C. When we look at it overall, our most opportunity area, our most obvious opportunity for improvement is with our students with disabilities. 38% of our traditional schools scored 41% or less than 41% of the points on this index. And so what will happen with these schools, it's light accountability. They simply are required to have strategies and an action plan in their school improvement plan with a plan to monitor the progress. As we go on, we're just going to circle back and look at a couple of our assessment results. This is English language arts, and the purpose of this illustration is to show the progress that some of our underperforming subgroups have made. When you look at this, those gray bars represent Hispanic students. The Black students, and the orange bars represent Hispanic students. So those students that are making the greatest progress are these 2 particular groups in both female and male. On the next slide, this is an expression. We're taking a look and tracking the difference between our subgroups to look for disparities, and this is a pretty strong focus for us. And when you look at it, this is language arts. This is showing at the top the difference between the Black and white subgroups at each of the grade levels in ELA. And you can see over the last 3 years that those gaps have come down modestly, but we are making progress, and the same with the Hispanic and white subgroups. In mathematics, less progress, but still some nice solid progress in a number of the grade levels. In a couple of instances, the gap has actually opened a little bit. Some good news, that we've been battling this chronic absentee issue. We've partnered with Harvard to do some problem solving around it. We saw some progress last year at the elementary level. You can see each one of those benchmarks has gotten a little bit better. We'll be continuing that project this year. One of the projects that we'll be piloting in the fall with our kindergarten, first and second graders is a postcard. This is an idea that we got from both Syracuse and another school system that saw some success with this, so that's part of the benefit of being in a network with other school districts. In addition, we have placed a particular emphasis through our master board process. with increasing opportunities for acceleration. So this is something that we should be proud of. You can see over the last 4 years, a number of our subgroups have seen double-digit gains in the percentage of students gaining access in middle school to high school math. And then finally, this is looking at college prep courses in high school. And across the board, with one exception or two exceptions, we see double-digit increases for different subgroups.
So now we're going to kind of really move more into our academic updates as it relates to our strategic plan and what kind of work that we have completed or are focusing on this upcoming year, in particular when we talk about single school culture in the areas of climate, behavior, and academics. Part of Senate Bill 7030 with the Fortify Florida app is that it's displayed on every student device throughout our district. That's a new requirement this particular school year, so that students are able to quickly notify any type of potential threat through, again, the Fortify Florida app. This is just one of the flyers that we provided for our schools, and this has already been accomplished. Again, big shout out to our IT department, really working to get that all set up for this school year. When we talk about school climate and improvement, one of the other areas of data that we took a deep dive with our principals, and we actually kind of triangulated this through the lens of a student, through the lens of a staff member, and then as well a lens through the parent, is really looking at our school effectiveness questionnaire and really developing an action plan for improvement to increase the climate and the positive supportive learning climate for our kids. Here, when we look at from the teacher lens and the staff lens, we can see over time that we're seeing some good improvement when we look overall, as well as instructional leadership, that we see some significant growth. From the student lens, we definitely took a deep dive here with our principals around what are the areas that you're seeing dips in. We did change 2 years ago some of the questions to be more targeted around equity, around diversity. So we did see some changes there that our schools are focusing on developing an action plan. And then through our parents, again, overall have been rated very high in how they view our school district. And again, some improvement when they see, in particular, around high expectations and addressing individual concerns of students. In addition, we created a resource center of all of the documents to, when we get deeper into addressing this climate, there's a lot of resources that are in a site for our schools to access. And we can see some of the benefits of this. Again, some big progress around our model schools for positive behavior support. In the bronze area, we see Eagles Landing, Pine Grove, Wellington were recognized by the state, again, in PBS. In the silver status, we have these schools, again, considerable growth. And at the gold status, large number of our schools, where just a couple years ago we had none. We have a lot of schools that are really stepping up around their school-wide positive behavior support plan. Big new body of work this year is our Department of Behavioral and Mental Health that has been really focused in around a lot of the changes with 7026 and 7030. We've talked to the board about our co-located services, our new behavior health professionals. We kicked off training this past week for those individuals. Our CAPE teams are providing those supports. Youth mental health first aid training is a big part of 7030, making sure that our schools provide that. Cognito is new this year. All of our schools this next week when teachers return. Cognito is a mental health training for school staff. It was a resource provided by the DOE this past year.
And in regard to equity and access, this slide gives you an idea of the number of faculty and staff members that we have had trained in regard to our Racial Equity Institute workshop, as well as our Beyond Diversity. The good news about this is that we were able to increase the number of sessions that we were able to provide due to additional funding. So we have way more demand, to be honest with you, for the opportunity to participate in these workshops. The good news is we had additional funding, so we were able to actually extend, I think, an additional 3 sessions than we had from last year. We have lots of requests from schools in regard to support around equity and access and cultural competence. But we listed three examples or 3 to 4 examples that were more of a long-term, meaning they were year-long projects, everything from the leadership teams at certain schools, as well as our legal department having lunch and learns around equity and access and how it impacts their work, as well as embedding it during our Principal Leadership Academy sessions, as well as our District Leadership Academy meetings. There are 2 bodies of work that we plan to move forward with. From the PD perspective, we're looking to create, there is a need for it, and it's been requested as well, a culturally responsive teaching course of some sort where we support teachers around that. We've been doing a really good job around providing students access to certain higher level courses. However, if you look at the work, everything centers around strategic initiative number 2, which is we're trying to get to the heart of the classroom where we embed cultural competence, equity, and access within instructional practices. So we've done a good job on the access part, and we still have some work to do, but we really need to focus more around the cultural competence pieces. We have our strategic initiative number 2 committee that has been working on a platform. It's an electronic platform, and it's called the Equity Dashboard. So we're almost to completion with that, and we'll be socializing that a little bit more and rolling that out, but that's going to help us also start those conversations that we need to have for students in school with our leadership teams for the decisions that we make for what access students have, as well as how they're treated within their classrooms for the content they're learning. Going on to existing work that we're going to continue to support, we're still doing our community outreach. We're changing the way we prepare our future principals. We're excited about that work that we're starting, that will be actually rolling out this year, as well as continuing the work around fleshing out what does strategic initiative number 2 really look like, instead of just calling it strategic initiative number 2. So our desired state is what we recently almost got to the point where we fleshed out with the more focus around the cultural competence.
Last spring, the board approved our math textbook adoption, and we're definitely excited to say that our K-8 schools, all instructional materials for math have been delivered. All middle school materials would have been delivered by the end of this week. So we are truly excited that we are ahead of schedule as it pertains to all schools K-8 receiving their new math adoption. Our professional development in regards to the new math adoptions, you could see there we have trained over almost 2,600 K-8 teachers at this time, and we still have several PD opportunities for the new math materials for any new teachers that we are hiring, and those trainings will continue on during the year, as we know that we're continuously filling positions. And the curriculum department is there also to continue with the in-classroom support. I am definitely excited as we talk about moving our work with our SEL, social and emotional learning. This morning I had the opportunity of opening up our first Summer Institute over at Palm Springs Middle School with our SEL leaders. We have 25 schools that going into year 2, and we're bringing on an additional 25 schools. So it was truly an honor to open that session this morning, and I will ask Mrs. Fetterman and her team to share a program booklet with the board office where you could see that work. And it's a 2-day institute, and we will conclude with that institute on tomorrow. As it pertains to the work that we are doing, our online platform with our IEPs and our LEP for our ELL students, I do want to say to you that we are on track with the pilot for our new platform for our IEPs, which will initially start second semester in January, and you could see that the gap analysis and some other work definitely are in progress, and we are on target there. Most importantly, we will be starting with our ELL platform, Elevation, starting in August. There are 35 schools that have been selected. Principals have been receiving the necessary PD. The schools that will be piloting both programs, schools have been notified. We are definitely working with the schools through the implementation stages, and we will keep the board informed as we move through the pilot of both programs. Our choice programs is up and running. You can see this particular slide here will introduce new choice programs for the upcoming school year. We have our new 3DE business management and analysis program coming up at Lake Worth High School, cybersecurity at Palm Beach Central in Wellington, and a STEM at Elbridge Gale, our dual language at Forest Hill, and an environmental science at Eisenhower. So we are definitely excited about extending to these 5 schools.
One of the programs that I think we're really proud to bring back to you is our digital classroom plan, and the teachers are really the heroes here. They've really embraced the training that goes with the technology. We've almost doubled the number of trailblazers that we have. We continue to see teachers going above and beyond to get the Google certified education. Next slide. This graph simply illustrates the daily usage of Google Classroom and Google Apps. So the digital environment that we say that we'd like to create, you can't get to 100,000 users per day unless the kids are using it. So we're proud of that. As you know, as part of the penny sales tax, we're rolling out interactive flat panels to every classroom. So this is our 2.5-year rollout plan. And next slide, please. So far, we've rolled or distributed almost 3,000 of the flat panels out. You've probably seen those around here as well. And this is, we've trained almost 5,000 educators, 1,500 school site training hours. And so the reason we're sharing this with you is because the training is happening in the school centers. As part of our contract, that was a requirement. So we have 10 dedicated days to each school to ensure that our investment is well used. In addition to that, the rest of the replacements, our hardware investments in our classroom continues to go well with document cameras and the audio enhancement. All of those are on track using the Penny at Work.
So we are ready, we are set, and we have a goal for this upcoming school year. And all this doesn't happen without the great work that's going on throughout all the departments here at the district, as well as our school-based administrators getting our schools ready. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to the superintendent, board chair, for any questions.
Thank you, sir. I open the dais to any questions, Mr. Chair.
Can you give us an update on the hiring of the mental health people who will be in each school? How far along are we on the hiring of all those employees?
With the behavioral health professionals, right now we are seeing, I don't have the exact number, but it's approximately 30 vacancies. So just about a good number of our schools have completed that, but we can send out the exact afterwards. But my update the other day was that.
Thank you. And first, I want to thank you. Great presentation. It's exciting. I want to thank you especially for including the data on students with disabilities. I know I talk about them ad nauseum, and just to remind the public, the reason I do that is that most students with disabilities in the district are not the profoundly disabled students. They're the students with speech and language and learning issues. And this is an area of huge opportunity for us, because now we really see where they're at. It's a great opportunity for us to put the resources there. I do want to ask, not now, but if you could bring back the data on the percentage of students with disabilities that are working on a standard diploma, because I want to make sure we don't push them into access points as we look at these figures. We want to get a true picture, and I really do think that we work towards them getting a standard diploma, and also the graduation rate for a standard diploma for students with disabilities. So I'd like that. And also, I want to make sure that our students with disabilities have equal access to the career opportunities, particularly the certifications that we're offering, because, sometimes they need a little modification in the testing, but, these students are graduating and they need jobs. And we have the great opportunity as we focus on them to be able to obtain that. And finally, an ask that would have to go back to Mr. McCormick is that for that online IEP, I'd love a demonstration before it's rolled out. I have to tell you that I am a techie person, but when they came out with online IEPs, it really bothered me because I was worried about losing the individualized part of an individualized education plan. So I just would like to take a look at it. But kudos to everyone. We're way ahead of where we were with our students with disabilities, our English language learners, our whole district. But I'm really glad that we're shedding light on an area that we really have an opportunity now to grow. So thank you.
Mr. Whitfield?
Thank you. First of all, you guys are amazing. This whole district, no one is sitting on their laurels. People are working so hard, and you can tell by the way that the grades have come up. Just so many of the different items that you brought forward today. So I really want to thank you so much for that. One of the things that I noticed when looking through this is if you look at the low 300 schools, they all kind of sit in the same corridor that Dr. Robinson and I share. That area can be very stressful for me. Well, 3 of them are in my town that I call my hometown for the elementary schools. And I know these people at these schools are working exceptionally hard. And the other part related to that is, as you were talking about the equity and access program, I love the work that you're doing. I think it's fabulous. One of the things that I would like to see is everyone in the district have some sort of a baseline education within equity. And I'm curious to understand, is there any that we mandate people take as a district that you have to be a part of? And are we keeping a record to see are our teachers and principals participating in some level of training? And I mean, maybe not every year, but over time. And I think, to me, this is where you can see the problems in equity in the district is when you look at these schools and they're really all in a very specific area of poverty. And poverty to me equals lack of equity. So I feel like we have to really fight that hard. The other thing I wanted to say, and I would love an answer to that question, but the last thing I wanted to say is, as school board members and people who really care about these communities, I would love to hear from the principals of these schools on how they want the communities to help. I come up with ideas all the time of ways that we can go in there and help, but they're my ideas, they're not principal ideas, and I think I would like to hear from them. What is it that they need from us? Because obviously they're not getting the same things that people in higher income areas are getting. So since they are all in the same general area. So please feel free to answer the question about equity classes. Thank you.
For your first question, do we keep a record of administrators and personnel that are taking the courses? And the answer is yes. We record it in 2 places. We have a spreadsheet that we have easy access to. Just say we get a phone call, it's easier to look there. And we also record it in our e-learning platform. So when anyone that takes Beyond Diversity, our Racial Equity Institute workshop, any of those we do. We're working on trying to build a culturally responsive teaching, as I spoke before, course. That one would also. As for mandatory courses at this time, no. There aren't mandatory professional development around not for REI and Beyond Diversity, if that's what you're referring to.
But when it comes to, as you brought the low 300, so when it comes to literacy training, so there are some required training that come out centrally for all schools that they must participate.
Yeah.
In addition, our regional supports, they will also provide additional supports and targeted support to these schools that are listed here, and that all of our schools will develop a school improvement plan. They'll target the professional development that's tailored to a particular school and what their focus is. So if they're taking a deep dive in any particular area, they'll put that in their
So is it too much to ask that for our schools that we get the school improvement plans? Because I would love to see what my schools specifically are working towards. Is that crazy? Is that too much to ask for them to send it to us?
No, we bring those to the board every year, and we have no problem.
I would love to see that. And then is there any kind of a baseline equity training that we're looking to make mandatory throughout the district? Is that something that we could do?
So
the capacity there for that?
So one that we've been recommending that they start with is REI. We've been recommending that, and we're also working on, when you say the word mandatory, we're working on, with our Preparing Future Principals program, we're looking to embed that as, I wouldn't say, as a requirement, as part of the work. So that's where that's what we were recommending that everyone starts, actually, and then go from there.
Beyond diversity, 2 years ago, all schools did set a team to go through beyond diversity, so that was required.
Yes, our principals, and the majority of them have, and we have record of that as well.
Through Pacific Education Group.
Mrs. Andrews?
And thank you, and I see that we are moving up, and we like that. Last year, I worked closely with Mr. Oswald, as well as the Glades region, and we had the member of the DOE come in to work with us. And it was pretty tight that we had to answer out. I do believe that we need to look at that, because as we're beginning to see that we are improving, we only want to continue to go up. Will you be able to devise a plan of action for all of the schools, especially the Glade schools and any of the schools that are really at risk? You got your lowest 300, that's on that list, that we can come up with a system where we can monitor. We had to monitor the vacancies. That was something we had to report out on. We did get the additional monies. Now, as you have said to me, Mr. Oswald, that money is back, even though the schools are off the list. Correct. They're not in trouble. We still have that money. So what is your plan that you can model based on what happened with the state coming in, working with us? And we had to be able to report out. We had community people at the table. I was at the table as a school board member. You were there, as well as the principals. We met once a month, and we came up with action plans. So how can you create something like that for all those schools who made it to a C? We don't want them to dive back to a D or an F or anything else, and luckily we still have some of the funding. What is your plan to make it tight so that we can have those kinds of discussions ongoing?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ms. Andrews. In fact, Ms. Avery Moore and Dr. McTeer are here right now because they're actually working with all their schools right now. So one of the things that we learned around the essentials training, which gets into the grading components, gets into the resources, working with district staff. Mr. Howard was out there yesterday. It was putting the essentials training that we usually put in January and February. We actually moved it back to this summer. So we started much earlier around those components, working with the leadership teams at each of the schools. So we've done a number of different things. Mr. Howard worked with the IT department when it came to our master board. We're now getting weekly updates on our master board this summer, so that our master boards for all schools, some of the things that we learned, making sure our master boards are ready for our schools this year. We're actually getting weekly reports to make sure that each and every kid is ready for school come on the 12th. So there's a number of strategies. Our regional teams and our instructionals have already been working with our schools, in particular the ones that are on the list, to develop a plan. So, some of the supervision of certain schools has changed this year to get ahead to provide additional supports to those schools and those resources. So a number of things happening, and I can meet with you to go for a little bit deeper in what we're doing out in the Glades.
I think it's good to have a deep dive with the community sitting at the table too. Some of your communities, we have educational advisory groups in many of the different areas, as well as I was sitting there as a school board member, so I kind of knew exactly what we were doing in each one of those schools, how we were feeling based on what was going on. The principals had a chance to give the input. Now, I hear what you're talking about. It's more based on the principal and the region superintendent and the inside. But I'm wondering, will you be able to put something together where we can have at least once a month an overview of how we're doing and what we need to do to kind of take us to the next level, similar to what we had with the state? Is that something that you can implement?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one piece that we are also starting with Ms. Andrews to assist with that for all schools, we've started with grades 3-5 in the Department of Curriculum, to where we have really taken a deeper dive in looking in regards to our curriculum platform and making certain that those lessons are indeed standards-based and it's tied. And it's held tight. So all that curriculum, the assessments, formative, summative assessments have been rewritten over the summer and uploaded, and principals have been requesting members of our curriculum department to come out and work with their teams in that new platform, as Ms. Fetterman and her team have spent a great amount of time the entire summer realigning our grades 3-5 curriculum and making it certain that it was aligned to standards, because we listened to the principals and the teachers and we heard that there were some concerns as it pertains to everything being held tight and tied to standards. And we are getting tremendous feedback, and that's one step that we've taken in regard to the curriculum aspect.
Just let me follow up one more minute, Mr. Barbieri, because as I looked at the FSA scores and I saw those grade levels that really needed some help with the teachers teaching at some grade levels did excellent, moved way up, and some that had some difficulty. And sometimes you have to rearrange the teachers based on where their strengths are. And that's what we did a lot of at the beginning of last year. Now that we've got the document to see exactly who did what, is that something that's happening right now in these schools that are at risk?
Absolutely. And part of your previous question, some of the practice that we learned through the state and that oversight will continue our instructional review process. All of the schools that are, not only those that are in school improvement, but the schools like the low 300, as well as other schools of concern, will get that same level of oversight and support to make those type of decisions. And yeah, as soon as school grades came out, actually, our regionals instructionals met with the principals to have those conversations. Who needs to be moved? Who needs additional resources? Those type of questions.
And the last thing, the Wallace, I'd like to know a little bit more about the teachers and the participation there with the Wallace that's in this report, and how well is it going? I think that's where we have some teachers, and what schools are participating in that.
Okay.
We'll provide a follow-up update on that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So you know this presentation makes me itch, right? Because I have like 3,000 questions, and I'll try to hold, 2,900 or so. But, okay, so let me start off with equity. I would hope that the board would have a workshop about what we mean by equity. So yesterday, I spent half the day in a community meeting with the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. And so all these people in the room were all talking about equity, and I'm certain we were probably talking about 10 different things. And so I think that, and everybody's talking about equity now. It's like the latest catchphrase, and it's getting on my nerves. But I'm glad we're saying it, but I just don't want it to be a catchphrase, right? And so Mrs. Andrews gave me the button from the Council of Great City Schools that said equity is a verb. Equity is a noun, right? There are actions that will lead to that noun, but I think as a board we need to have a conversation about what the definition of that noun is, because it is very frustrating to me to hear the word, because I know that I'm thinking something different. So anyway, and let me just say this before I get to my real question. So part of what I think that we need to do, and I actually said this to these numerous community organizations and governmental agencies that were in the room yesterday, is that we have got to spend time thinking about what equity means in our work. And the first part of that is asking the questions that will tell you if there's equity. And some of those questions I'm about to ask. But I think that we need to have that conversation. I would hope that we will get to the point, and I'll just say thank you now for the manager that will work on equity. But I think that we need to, if we mean what we say, that we will say that we expect every department and every school to dedicate at least 1 hour a month to talk about what equity looks like in their work, right? Because equity starts in thinking about it and in having the conversation. That equity, we cannot impose equity in policy, right? Equity starts in the mind and then the action that follows. And so I'm hoping that we're going to actually move to true equity work, right? Okay, so I'm going to be done with that for right now. So let's talk about the data. So would you please give us follow-up data, Mr. Howard, that disaggregates ELL and ESC? Because one thing that we know is that in whatever you're looking at, almost any data, any metric that you look at in this country, there's disparities based on race, right? And so And I think since we have significant overlap, especially we had the disproportionality of black children being identified in the negative ESE categories, I would like to tease out the ESE and ELL by race so we can see what we're doing within each one of those groups, right? And the point of that is to address the disproportionality. So I would also want to go to your slide 30. Oh, look, boom. Reading my mind. Who read my mind like that? Okay, boom. So, okay, but guess what? So, like, you know, you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. So this is the increase, right? I want to see the snapshot, right? So you know that graph I ask for every year? That's the level 3 and above disaggregated by race and gender and socioeconomics, right? That's what I think we need to see. The gains are great, right? But if you're starting way, way, way behind, you know, I don't know if that much gain is leading us to equitable outcomes, right? So I'm just going to request an update on that slide I ask for every year so the
I know
board
which
can
ones you're
get-
referring to.
I know you do. Thank you. Then in terms of equity, okay, since I'm gonna just repeat that word 25 times. So I applaud the schools in the Glades. I think what the board needs to see is the additional resources that went to the schools in the area to lead to those marvelous results. I would also like certainty that we're not now going to remove those resources. I mean, I heard some language to suggest that we're not. I just want to reinforce that. I understand, for example, now, and I guess Mr. Burke would probably be the one to correct me on this, but I understand, for example, by way of comparison, that Kennedy got 0 above allocation, right? Now, if that's true, shame, 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 right? So, I mean, at some point, we have to stabilize this. I've had this conversation for several years. Dr. Christensen referred to it as the whack-a-mole effect. I want to stop that, right? The other thing is, it should not, in my opinion, depend upon the principals to say what additional things they need. You're the district leadership. You know what they need, right? You can look at the data and tell what additional support is needed. I'm going to remind those of us who've been around a while of the AAA plan. You remember when we had the Accelerating Academic Achievement Plan, which basically had 2 formulas, those for the schools who were at risk of whatever euphemism we used, right? And then the standard one. I think we need to get back to that, right? I think that we need to say, at least identify what the goal is. Mr. Burke is going to tell us that we can't do everything we need. I get that. But I think the board needs to have an intellectual conversation about where we disproportionately place resources for those who have been left behind. And that will be a conversation around equity, right? So, I mean, I just, you know, I'm going to ask Dr. Fennoy, I'm going to ask you to bring the board forward a scenario of 2 budgets, one for the at-risk, whatever euphemism, low 300, whichever euphemism you want, right? In terms of what additional supports they need. I think the schools in the Glade, based upon their results, might be kind of a model for us to go by. And then we have the regular budgetary allocation, right? Am I clear on my request? Or am I just talking to myself? Because, no, I know you do. Okay, but I'm just saying, I'm just telling you because I'm tired, right? I'm tired of having these same conversations, right? And now keep people everywhere saying equity. I need to see some equity in my lifetime. How about that? Okay, I'm gonna move on. So, when are we going to revise the strategic plan? Or are we just going to play it out?
So we're going to start we plan on starting that work this year. So the plan ends in 2021. Yeah.
So the plan is right now is to not revise it until 21.
we're going to start the process. If it happens to end earlier, then if we implement something earlier, we will, but we have to go through a
Okay.
year-long process.
So I want to request that we start looking at college ready. Real college ready. So as I recall, I think it was at the Council of Great City Schools, and I think it was San Diego, but I'm not 100% on that they used a metric on the kids who were ready for college based upon the state of California's college requirements, entrance requirements, right? So, and I mean college ready without the expectation of remediation, right? I think we're ready to set a new benchmark, is my point. And I think that that's what it is. You could come up with something better, that's fine, but I'm ready to set a new benchmark because high school diplomas don't mean what they used to. And I want, and the other thing is, this whole school grading thing, it gives me heartburn. I understand that that's the test we have to pass, but I want us to have higher expectations and measure things that we know really measure whether or not we're preparing students for successful adult lives, right? And the school grades don't tell me that, right? So I'm offering that as a suggestion to look at maybe what San Diego does, but some kind of measure on with each one of those groups who's ready for college, and then that will then tell us what we need to do to back map for those who we are not preparing for college. Just two more things for now. So really, we're going to do another Spanish dual language program, and we don't have any Creole dual language yet. That's what I read, right?
For the high school, we are, but we're having conversations and looking at some schools around Creole dual language. So we are looking at that. There's not a lot of districts throughout the country that are going specifically into Creole, as well as the challenge of the resources that are available.
Okay, but we take pride in being the front runners, right? So let's be the front runner here. And then the last question is, what additional acceleration opportunities do we have other than AMP? Or can we, let me offer a suggestion. Can we make sure that we're looking at, I got a phone call yesterday from a parent whose son is entering Roosevelt 6th grade, who's gifted, and she wanted to know, state certified gifted, okay? So she wanted to know what additional acceleration opportunities that he would have. And all I could think of was AMP. And so if we have others, can you just send us an email and let us know? And if we don't, can we put that on we should work on that to list?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mrs. Andrews?
Just to add a few more things here. I would like to see, when we look at that lowest 300 list, as well as those Title I schools, that are really up there, the 80 and the 90%, I think we need to have a specialized way that they get to be able to recruit the best and the brightest first. And I've been asking for that for a while. We used to do that back in the day. So if you could kind of make that happen. And I'm also thinking that we need to look at our alternative schools because, when we think about the teachers there, they need to get the first priority. We almost need to be paying them different, Mr. Burke, because when you think about the administrators that actually run our alternative centers and our specialized programs that we have and the teachers there, it's a whole different kind of setup. It's not the same as your comprehensive elementary, middle, or high school. So we've got to come up with some kind of system where we actually look at those schools different from the standpoint of budgets, from the standpoint of hiring, and from the standpoint of specific support and training, professional development training. I find sometimes when I go to those schools, they seem to be left behind somewhat. So if we can kind of look at them, we know where our pockets of poverty are here in Palm Beach County, and we need to put together some kind of action plan on how we take care of those, because we know where they are. So if we can do that, I think it's going to be needed. This is great because we are improving. I'm really thrilled, but I just know when you dig down deep and you begin to look at where the real need is, especially with our ESC and ELL and in the settings where they are, we need to make sure we have a specialized plan for them. that's a part of the strategic plan, but with some emphasis on how we work with them different from how we may work with others. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Board members, if we can adjourn the meeting until 5:05 rather than start another workshop. At 5:05, we have a time certain for the budget. So we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll be back at 5:05.